Okay, so picture this. You walk into a bookstore, head over to the religion section, and bam, you're hit with a whole wall of Bibles. You've got the King James, the New Living, the English Standard. There are dozens of them. It's a lot, and it makes you wonder.
Right? If it's all supposed to be the same book, how come there are so many different versions? And more importantly, why do they sometimes say things that seem, well, completely different? This isn't just some dusty academic question. It actually gets to the very heart of a pretty incredible and dangerous story, how we even got the Bible in English in the first place.
Let's look at a perfect example. Here's one verse, Hebrews 4:12. The classic King James Version says, "The word of God is quick." But then you pick up the New Living Translation and it says it's alive. Now both are powerful ideas for sure, but quick and alive are not the same word. So what gives? To understand this, we've got to go way back to a time when just trying to translate the Bible into English could get you killed.
Yeah, for centuries, the story of the English Bible wasn't happening in quiet libraries. It was a high-stakes, underground mission. We're talking rebellion. We're talking risk. We're talking a full-on revolution.
Think about this. For over 1,000 years, the official Bible of the entire Western world was in Latin. It was called the Vulgate, which is great if you can read Latin. But for pretty much everybody else, the book was basically locked in a vault. You had no way to read it for yourself. It was completely inaccessible.
You can see on this timeline just how intense the struggle was. For almost 1,000 years, nothing. Then, in the 1380s, a guy named John Wycliffe defies the authorities and makes the first full English Bible. A huge deal, but he was translating from a Latin, basically making a copy of a copy. The real game changer was William Tyndale. In 1526, he goes back to the original Greek to get as close to the source as possible. And for this heroic work, he was executed.
The great scholar Bruce Metzger told a story that just puts this all into perspective. Someone who hated a translation he worked on actually burned it and sent him the ashes in an urn. His response? He was just glad they were burning the Bible and not the translator. Because back in the day, they burned the translator. Just wow.
So after all that struggle, after all that danger, the political tides finally began to turn. And that massive shift led to the creation of what is, without a doubt, one of the most influential books ever printed in the English language.
The year is 1611. After centuries of forbidden underground work, an authorized English Bible is finally published, the King James Version. And this thing wasn't just another translation, it was a cultural earthquake. It sent shockwaves through language, literature, and faith that we still feel today, over 400 years later.
I mean, the KJV was a monumental achievement. A team of 54 scholars created this absolute masterpiece of English prose. But, and this is the key to our whole mystery, those brilliant translators could only work with what they had at the time. And what they had was a text based on fewer than a dozen Greek manuscripts.
Which brings us to the big question, right? If the King James Bible was so good, if it shaped our language and served millions of people for centuries, why on earth did we need to make new ones? Why are there so many versions today?
And here is the single biggest reason. It's not that the KJV translators got it wrong. It's that we have found a treasure trove of information they never had. It's like they were putting together a puzzle with just a handful of pieces, and now we have over 5,000 pieces. Many of them are much older and closer to the original writings. But you know what? That's only half the story. The other half is about how we translate.
Okay, this is it. This is where we solve the mystery of quick versus alive. See, almost all the differences between modern Bibles come down to two totally different philosophies about what translation is even for.
Before we get too technical, let me give you a non-Bible example that makes this super clear. In German, there's a common saying, "Ich verstehe nur Bahnhof." If you translate that word for word, you get, "I only understand train station," which makes no sense, right? But if you translate the meaning behind it, you get the English equivalent, "It's all Greek to me." See, both are translations, but they have completely different goals.
So that first approach, the "I only understand train station" method, that's called formal equivalence. You can think of it as a word-for-word translation. The main goal here is to be as literal as possible, to preserve the original words and even the sentence structure, even if it ends up sounding a little stiff or formal in English.
The motto for these translators is basically as literal as possible, as free as necessary. They'll stick to a word-for-word translation unless it becomes total gibberish. Now, the key thing to get here is that this approach leaves more of the interpretive work up to you, the reader.
Okay, the second approach is called dynamic equivalence. This is our "it's all Greek to me" method. The goal here isn't to translate the specific words, but to translate the original thought, the idea behind the words. So the translator does more of the interpretive work up front to give you something that reads naturally in modern, everyday language.
So let's just break down the trade-offs here. On one side, you have the formal, word-for-word translations like the King James or the English Standard Version. They give you a really close look at the original language's structure. But on the other side, you have the dynamic thought-for-thought translations like the NIV or the NLT. Their strength is giving you a super clear sense of the author's original meaning.
Okay, so after all that history, all that theory, let's bring it right back to where we started. What does this actually mean for you, standing in that bookstore, trying to pick a Bible off the shelf?
Well, the first and most important thing to know is this. It is not about which one is right and which one is wrong. A word-for-word translation isn't somehow more holy than a thought-for-thought one. They are simply different tools for different jobs.
So the best way to choose is just to ask yourself what you're looking for. Are you doing deep study? Then a word-for-word version might be great because it shows you more of the original structure. Are you looking for something for daily reading? A thought-for-thought version might be way more engaging. Honestly, a lot of people find the best solution is to just use one of each.
So when you see that whole shelf of Bibles, you're not just choosing a book, you're choosing a philosophy. You're choosing a bridge to get from what the Bible said thousands of years ago to what it actually meant. And thankfully, after a long and bloody history, that choice is now entirely up to you.